Have you ever noticed how the things you try hardest to bury never truly go away? The anger you suppress, the shame you hide, the fears you pretend don't exist. Like shadows at dusk, they follow you. No matter how far you run, Alan Watts once suggested a paradox that unsettles most people. The part of yourself you try hardest to hide might actually be the very key to your life's purpose. Think about that for a moment. What if the darkness you fear is not your enemy, but a hidden compass pointing you toward who you really are? Carl Jung called this hidden territory the shadow self, the collection of desires, instincts, and truths we've exiled to the back of our minds because they didn't fit the image we wanted the world to see. We wear masks of politeness, competence, or strength, while beneath the surface, another self waits quietly. And yet, as Watts reminds us, the more we deny this shadow, the more fragmented and incomplete we become. This video is not about defeating your darkness or pretending to be endlessly positive. It's about turning toward the hidden self with courage, because the shadow is not simply a place of fear. It's also a wellspring of energy, creativity, and authenticity. So, join me on this journey. Together, we'll explore how facing the parts of yourself you've long avoided may unlock the very purpose you've been searching for all along. From the very beginning of our lives, we are taught which parts of us are acceptable and which must be hidden away. A child cries too loudly, and they're told to be quiet. They show anger, and they're told to be nice. They express fear, and they're told, don't be weak. And slowly, without realizing it, we start building a mask made of smiles, obedience, and carefully chosen behaviors, while all the unwanted emotions are pushed down into the basement of the mind. Carl Jung gave this hidden basement a name, the shadow. And Alan Watts believed that denying this shadow is one of the greatest sources of human suffering, because the more we try to exile these pieces of ourselves, the more they haunt us. Think about it. How many times have you reacted in ways you didn't fully understand? You explode in anger over something small. You feel jealousy but disguise it as indifference. You crave recognition, but you bury that desire beneath humility. These are moments when the shadow leaks through the cracks of our carefully constructed identity. Watts often reminded us that life is not about eliminating the dark in order to be purely light. It's about recognizing that light and dark are inseparable, like the two sides of a coin. To deny one is to live only half a life, and that denial breeds an inner conflict, a sense that something essential is missing. The irony is that by burying our so-called flaws, we also bury our vitality. The same energy we repress, the anger, the fear, the longing, could become fuel for creativity, courage, and deeper connection. But only if we dare to turn toward it. And this brings us to the deeper question. If denying the shadow keeps us incomplete, what happens when we finally face it? When we hide the shadow, we like to believe it disappears. But the truth is it never vanishes. Instead, it lingers in the dark corners of the psyche, waiting for its chance to break free. And when it does, it doesn't come gently. It erupts in ways that can quietly sabotage our lives. Alan Watts often said that what we repress becomes what we are most controlled by. Think of the person who insists they are never angry. They present themselves as calm, agreeable, always collected. Yet one day they explode over something trivial, a late text, a careless word, a minor mistake. That eruption is not random. It is the shadow, demanding to be seen. Or consider someone who hides their fear behind arrogance, pretending to be invulnerable. Deep down, they may tremble with insecurity, but instead of acknowledging it, they project strength. Over time, this creates a brittle shell, easily shattered by the smallest failure. Psychologists have long observed that suppressed emotions don't simply fade. They transform into anxiety, depression, or chronic tension. The energy we use to keep parts of ourselves buried comes at a cost. It drains us, leaving us restless, irritable, or numb. Jung warned that the more we deny the shadow, the more it slips into the unconscious and begins to live our lives for us. Through self-sabotage, destructive relationships, or patterns we can't seem to escape. But here's the paradox. The shadow isn't out to destroy us. It only becomes dangerous when we refuse to face it. It is like a child locked in a room. Ignored for too long, it grows louder and more desperate. What we resist persists, and what we deny returns in disguise. So if suppression only leads to suffering, the real question becomes, how do we begin to face the shadow without being consumed by it? If you want to know your shadow, look no further than the people who provoke you. Our relationships are not just social exchanges, they are mirrors, reflecting the parts of ourselves we struggle to accept. Alan Watts often pointed out that others irritate us most when they embody traits we've disowned. For example, you might despise someone's arrogance, but secretly, that arrogance touches a nerve because you've buried your own desire to be seen, to take up space, to be unapologetically confident. Instead of acknowledging it, you reject it in others. Think about envy. When we envy someone, it's not only because they possess what we lack, it's because they express a part of ourselves we've locked away. The artist we envy may remind us of the creativity we once abandoned. The friend's success may awaken the ambition we told ourselves was wrong or unreachable. The irritation we feel toward them is not really about them. It's about us. Jung described this as projection, where we cast the contents of our shadow onto the people around us. And Watts used this idea as evidence that human beings are deeply interconnected. Others act as teachers, even when we don't want them to. Every conflict, every grudge, every spark of jealousy is an invitation to look inward and ask, what part of me am I seeing in them? The uncomfortable truth is that the qualities we condemn in others are often qualities we have not made peace with in ourselves. This doesn't mean we should blindly accept toxic behavior, but it does mean we must ask whether our reaction is rooted in reality or in the shadow we've tried to deny. And here lies the opportunity. Instead of blaming the mirror, we can use it. By observing our reactions to others, we begin to map the contours of our hidden self. But if the shadow keeps showing up in those around us, what would happen if we stopped projecting and instead chose to meet it face to face within ourselves? For most of us, the shadow feels like an intruder, something to be locked away, ignored, or battled against. But Alan Watts and Carl Jung both insisted on a radical truth. The shadow is not your enemy. In fact, it is the missing half of your wholeness. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Watts echoed this idea when he reminded us that light cannot exist without darkness, just as mountains cannot exist without valleys. To reject the shadow is to reject half of reality and half of ourselves. Integration, then, is not about purging the darkness, but about befriending it. When we invite the shadow into awareness, something extraordinary happens. The very energy we once used to suppress our fears and desires becomes fuel for authenticity. The anger we denied can transform into courage. The longing we buried can become creativity. Even the fear we resisted can become compassion. Because by knowing our own vulnerability, we can finally empathize with the vulnerability of others. Watts believed that life becomes richer when we stop demanding perfection and start embracing paradox. To be whole is to contain contradictions. To be both strong and fragile, both generous and selfish, both light and dark. Wholeness does not come from polishing away flaws, but from standing firmly in the tension between them. And here lies the liberation. When you accept your shadow, it loses its power to control you. What once sabotaged you becomes a source of depth. What once frightened you becomes a teacher. You stop living as half a person and begin living as a complete one. So the question is no longer, how do I defeat my darkness? But rather, how do I walk with it so that it becomes part of my strength? We often think our purpose will be found in the things we are naturally good at, the skills we polish, the roles that win approval, the paths that feel safe. But Alan Watts would say the opposite, that our life's purpose is just as likely to be hidden in the places we fear to look. Consider this. The qualities we repress most fiercely are often the very ones that hold the key to our direction. The person who hides their anger may actually have a calling to stand up against injustice. The one who suppresses their creativity out of fear of failure may be destined to express themselves in ways that inspire others. The person who buries their longing for freedom might be called to break out of conformity and chart a new path. Carl Jung called the shadow the seat of creativity, and Watts believed discomfort itself was a signpost. The things we resist are often the very doors we are meant to open. If envy, fear, or shame keeps tugging at us, perhaps it's not a signal to turn away, but an invitation to lean in. Think of it like this: your shadow is not only a container of wounds, it is also a map. Each buried desire points towards something you have disowned, something that longs to be reclaimed, and in reclaiming it, you move closer to your truest self. This is why shadow work is not just about healing. It is about guidance. By facing what you fear, you discover what you value. By embracing what you hide, you uncover what you were meant to share. So if your shadow is a compass, the question is no longer, what should I do with my life? But what have I been running from, and what might it reveal if I finally turn toward it? Philosophy is powerful, but it only transforms us when it moves from theory into practice. Alan Watts often reminded his listeners that wisdom is not about collecting ideas, but about living them. So how do we actually begin to work with the shadow in our daily lives? The first step is awareness. Begin with journaling. Each day, write down the moments that trigger you: anger, jealousy, shame, irritation. Instead of judging yourself, ask, what does this reaction reveal about the part of me I try to hide? Over time, these entries begin to form a map of your shadow. Another practice is dialogue. Imagine sitting across from your shadow and having a conversation. What would it say if it could speak? What does it need from you? Sometimes the simple act of listening to the hidden voice within can transform its grip on you. Meditation also helps. Not meditation to escape, but meditation to notice. Sit in silence and observe the thoughts you normally push away. Watts described meditation as watching the thinker, letting the unconscious rise without resistance. In this stillness, the shadow shows its face, not as a monster, but as a part of you longing to be seen. And finally, expression. The shadow's energy often seeks release. Paint, write, dance, or speak the words you've never dared to share. Creativity is one of the most powerful tools for integration because it transforms raw, chaotic emotion into meaning. The point is not to conquer the shadow, but to build a relationship with it. Each practice is a way of saying, I see you, I hear you, I will not run from you anymore. And when you stop running, you begin to notice something remarkable. The shadow that once felt like a burden becomes a source of depth, originality, and inner freedom. So often, we treat the shadow as a curse, a burden we wish we could cast off. But Alan Watts and Carl Jung remind us of a deeper truth. The shadow is not a prison. It is a map. It points us toward the very parts of ourselves that we need to reclaim in order to live fully. Your life's purpose is not found by running endlessly toward the light, pretending the dark does not exist. It is found by integrating the two, by realizing that wholeness comes not from perfection, but from inclusion. The shadow carries the very gifts we thought we had to hide: strength hidden in anger, creativity buried beneath shame, compassion born from fear. And so I leave you with a question. What part of yourself have you been hiding? And what gift might it carry if you chose to embrace it? Because perhaps, just perhaps, the purpose you've been searching for has been waiting in the very place you were afraid to look. If this journey spoke to you, I invite you to carry it forward. Reflect, share these ideas with others, and allow them to see their own shadow in a new light. And if you'd like to continue exploring wisdom like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more reflections on the path to wholeness.